I'm going to call our meeting to order with forgive me, I'm trying to get myself organized here. Phone is ringing. The Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District meeting for Tuesday, March 19th, 8:30 a.m. start time. Got a little earlier start time than usual. Mr. Mike Brown, will you lead us in a salute to the flag, sir? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Von Hartung, Chair.
Present.
Bob Lucy, Vice Chair.
Here.
Marcia Burke-Bigler.
Here.
Kitty Jung.
Present.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Chief Charlie Moore.
Here.
And
good morning.
District Attorney seems to be absent.
I don't think we can.
I don't think we can. We need to wait. We need to wait.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're going to go into recess until we locate our district attorney. I apologize.
You're okay, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. Good morning. I'm going to open our meeting back up. We've been informed that we can attend to some business without the DA being present. Chief, item number 3, let's move to public comment.
Item 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person, and comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Okay, thank you. I have Ms. Catherine Snediger signed in. Ms. Snediger, welcome.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Catherine Snediger, non-person, non-resident, unenfranchised natural person, woman. I would like to have our volunteer fire department back. I would like them to be the way they were in the 90s, where we had EMTs in Palomino Valley, located in the Warm Springs Valley, and we had several volunteers. There were several wildfires they put out. They saved my house from burning down, and you took that away. Why? My largest investment I'll ever make is not worth anything to you guys, I guess. It's just a fire, let it burn down, you got insurance, right? That's not the way it's supposed to work. And I think you're disgusting for taking the volunteers away, making ridiculous demands on how everybody has to meet at the firehouse and go to the fire. You can't take your privately owned vehicle. That's stupid. That's flat out stupid. You've got people from all over the valley. There's 88 miles of road out there, 40-acre parcels. And you're saying they all have to meet at the little fire station before they can get to the fire? That's stupid. And it's incompetent. And that's what you guys are, stupid and incompetent. Maybe it looks good on paper, but in real life, it doesn't look good. So I don't understand why you knowingly, willingly, and intentionally, from the top down, put our homes in Palomino Valley in harm's way. I don't understand that. If there's a fire, all able-bodied people show up in their privately owned vehicles to put it out. You put a stop to that. Why? It makes no sense. And then, when they get there, they can't get out of the truck, so what difference does it make? Or, as Kathy Glather stated, they're on standby. Raging fire going on around them, and they're on standby. Can't do anything. What the heck is wrong with you people? And I think we need to have some citizens on that fire commission, because you guys, as far as I'm concerned, are bankrupting the county with what the fire department wants and for the service I get. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no one else signed in wishing to speak. Is there anyone else? Seeing none, I will close that item. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 4 is Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among commissioners will take place on this item. Mr. Chairman, I have one announcement. I'd like to request that the board pull the minutes for discussion. I do have one minor change to the minutes.
Okay. All right. So we will pull the minutes. Okay.
In item 5.
In item 5. Thank you, Chief. Anything else?
No.
Commissioners, I have no one signed in. Is there anyone? Okay. Seeing none, I will close item number 4. Chief, item number 5, consent with minutes being pulled.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest a change to page 5 in the second paragraph on line 5. The word Valley Road should be changed to Sun Valley, indicating Sun Valley Fire Station.
Okay. All right. Anything else? entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lucy.
I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with the recommended changes by Chief Moore.
I have a motion by Commissioner Lucy, second by Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I believe motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes. Motion passes unanimously. Chief, I know we want to move item 10 up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to request that you take item 10 out of order and as the next agenda item. So Mr. Brown has an appointment at the legislature, so we'd like to get him up early if we could.
Mr. Brown. Welcome.
Well, good morning. Welcome. My name is Mike Brown. As you know, I've been working with R&R Partners as a consultant as well as a lobbyist, and been working on several issues, not only here in Washoe County, but throughout the state. And I got to say, it was quite the privilege to work on some of the issues with Area 22 North, which, if you look at the report, I've labeled as Gerlach-Washoe Rural 22 North. And about December, we had some discussions, Chief Moore, myself, and our county manager, on taking a look at services and seeing what we could do to make some suggestions on how we could work with the services that are currently there and possibly make some improvements in the future. And I want to apologize first right off the bat, Chairman, as well as to the other commissioners. I had a goal of meeting with every one of you to discuss one-on-one with some of these issues, and I was unable to meet with everyone. But for those that I did, Commissioner Herman, Burke-Bigler, and a little bit with Commissioner Lucy as well as Commissioner Jung, I appreciate the information. Commissioner Herman, it's your district, and you were a wealth of knowledge and information to really help to make this process work, and I appreciate that, as well as the support that you give the folks out in those areas. So thank you very much. So as I laid this out, I started off with a purpose on what was taking place there, and it was to provide a report of findings and recommendations. And I tried to keep it to 3 because I felt if I made too many, it might confuse the situation. So I kept it to 3, and you'll see that towards the middle of the report. But to look at the Washoe Rural 22 North, and there's been a lot of discussions over the last few months on the level of services provided there and what's taken place in the past and what we can do in the future. So I started off with a little history of what was taking place with the Gerlach volunteers as well as the volunteer agencies that are in 22 North. And most of rural can be described as a desert. Mixed use residential, some commercial with a medium amount of scattered residences, private land, farming, agricultural lands, and some commercial industry. You know the area. It's in the Washoe part, in the north part of our county. 22 North has always been of great discussion for many years. I've been in the area for about 40 years, and I worked Truckee Meadows as an auxiliary and seasonal several years ago, and I can remember back in those days where 22 was always mentioned as not being within the Truckee Meadows boundary or footprint, but within the county's footprint, and ways that we could make it work. For many years, you had a very good volunteer service out there. In fact, you'll see in the reflection of some of the numbers when we go back 5 years when the volunteers were in place, a lot of those calls came in through our normal system, our 911 system, but also a lot of those went to that volunteer agency direct. And that's how it happens in a lot of rural communities. When you look at the area out there, Gerlach is the largest community located within Washoe Rural 22 North with the neighboring tribal communities of Nixon and Sutcliffe. Tribal lands and residents of Nixon and Sutcliffe receive all-risk public safety services that include fire response, emergency medical services, as well as ambulance transport, all managed by the tribe and staffed currently with 11 full-time or paid staff members and 11 volunteers at various levels of response service capabilities. Gerlach Fire Department currently provides coverage with all-risk public safety services that include fire response, emergency medical services, as well as ambulance transport that's managed through an agreement with the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. Currently staffed with 2 paid staff members and 7 volunteers identified as 5 members at the operational level and 2 members at the support level. Prior to 2014, from what records I could find show, the Gerlach volunteers were and continue in many ways to be the backbone of the service delivery in Gerlach in a large area of rural Washoe 22 North. The second page actually goes over a synopsis of 5 years of call volume. And you can see started in 2013 through 2018, a significant increase in calls. Yes, sir.
I don't have a,
I have it for distribution, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I should have made sure before I started.
In the beginning, it was okay, but hit second page.
Chairman, I'm sorry about that. I should have looked at the looks on everybody's faces when they were flipping through the
Thank
packets.
you. Okay. Okay,
Okay,
Proceed.
so on page 2, you can see the last 5 years of call volume, which vary in a lot of different, but again, EMS being the biggest calls, and that's pretty much typical within what we're seeing, not only here in, Nevada, but out through the entire nation. I do have to point out on 2017, I failed to put in the 78 calls, but the 137 with the 78 is what that equals out to. And you can see 2013, 17 calls. And again, why only 17 calls back then? And again, that's when the volunteers were active, and I truly believe, looking at this, a lot of those calls for service went directly to the fire department, again, because that's how they work.
so Chief, in 2017, the 78 calls, that comes under the EMS heading?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And again, I apologize for that. And then you can see, on a regular, they keep increasing, 20, 71, 137, and 136 in 2018. So there is an increase. And what's that attributed to? Well, as we've talked, Burning Man during certain times of the year increases that call volume, not only to the Burning Man event, but also on our highways and the community there. And then, they have, that's a pathway again from California. You look at where Cedarville comes in, and again, they use that highway again to get to Reno, get to Nevada. And so that increases the call volume again with that traffic and what's taking place on the traffic. So a lot of various reasons of what's taking place out there.
So Chief, I have a question for you.
Yes,
and I'm
sir.
sorry to interrupt, but on those EMS calls, do we have a breakdown of calls that are associated with Burning Man versus the neighbors versus, something else? Just a call because there was an automobile accident or something of that nature?
And Chief Moore's shaking his head that we could break that down and see what those calls are during that period of time, that's for sure.
Yes. I'd be interested to see that. Thank
Okay.
you.
So when we go to page 3,
Commissioner, hold on just a second.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Jung.
Thank you. Chief Brown, wouldn't it make more sense to just tell me when in the calendar these happened? I can tell you if they're attributed to Burning Man or not just by looking at the calendar. And then I didn't quite understand what you said as to why it went from, let's say, 20 in 2015 and 137 in 2017. The population didn't rise that much. So is what you said is that we weren't keeping good data at the time because it directly went to the volunteer station?
It depends. Chief Moore, could you enlighten them? Because again, I pulled this data supplied from the county.
In some cases, yes, Commissioner Jung, the answer may be data-related, but I think by and large, there's just simply better record keeping and
Okay, better record keeping
Yeah.
is what you would attribute that to. So there isn't really an artificial jump. Well, it is artificial. The jump is artificial, which you can attribute largely to not increase in Burning Man, because it hasn't changed. Their permit stays the same, about 10,000 plus or minus. Instead, it's better record keeping and accounting for every single call. I would like to see the calendar. Why don't you just give me the last 3 years, the calendar of when these calls came, because that will help me make a decision and recommendation as well. Thank you, Chief.
Sounds good. So we'll go into fixed facilities equipment, and where we're going here is that there's a lot of already in place when it comes to being able to provide a fire department service from those fire departments. And your station out there is number 242. It's located in Gerlach at 421 Cottonwood. And the fire station is attached to your Gerlach Community Center, which is a manufactured steel building. It's got 4 apparatus bays with electric roll-up doors, and the entire building has all associated requirements for utilities that allow the staff to be staffed and utilized for public events and housing of public safety equipment. But there's one exception on this. There's no backup power supply when it comes to being able to provide a generator at this time or in the current future. So under the recommendations after doing a tour of the facility, we also need to look at the safety concerns when we come to housing potentially 24-hour services in the future and equipment. And the station doesn't have an exhaust extraction system. And what that is an example of is that most of the vehicles out there are diesel. When you fire the diesel up, the diesel goes throughout the entire bay, and then those hydrocarbons and offshoots of the diesel can settle throughout the entire building. Most throughout the nation now are equipped with exhaust extraction, mainly for safety concerns for our people, but also the equipment that's going to be used as well. So, the recommendation would be to install an exhaust extraction system as well as a generator that could be used not only for the fire side, but also for the community side. They could power the entire building. For times when emergencies take place, it could also be a point where we could use that as a center for safety for the community and themselves. So, moving on, he also established that adjacent to the fire station, a modular home has been provided by Washoe County, and I believe that was for future planning and speculation that 24-hour staffing services could be housed in the modular. The needs of the emergency and non-emergency responses for the Gerlach and the Washoe 22 North. So recommendation on your modular after doing a site visit out there would require completion of the skirting around the lower portion of the modular and potential removal of mold and other repairs that are essential for the needs of staffing and for the community use. When you look at the equipment, fixed facilities equipment within Gerlach, you've got good equipment out there, you really do. They've got a Type 1, a Type 2 engine, a Type 3 engine, a Type 1 water tender. You've got one Type 1 ambulance, which is a 2009, so it's relatively new. And then you've got a backup ambulance that's a 1992 that has almost exceeded its life expectancy. It was donated to the tribes, and then from the tribes donated for a backup unit to the Gerlach area. And then you've got a UTV that's utilized potentially for other needs. And then associated appliances, when that comes to hoses and appliances for any type of fire needs, wild land versus structure. Firefighting gear when it comes to structure gear. Associated medical equipment and supplies for rendering medical care to the sick and injured. And your communication kit equipment, it's all there, and what you need necessarily to receive calls as well as talk to your neighboring agencies, so the 800 system as well as our VH systems and UHF for talking to our medical and our hospitals. So everything's in place here when it comes to the facility as well as the equipment and the needed equipment for your personnel out there. So now we move into recommendations. You notice every one of the recommendations will start with service delivery standards and expectations. And I ask that the Washoe County Commissioners need to evaluate and decide on a level of service delivery standards that will best serve the Gerlach and Washoe Rural 22 North. And I put a glossary in the back, and I put an example of what a service delivery expectation may be, and that's on page 9 at the bottom. And standards and expectations delivered from representatives of the Washoe County Commission for emergency response and mitigation. An example, that Gerlach, Washoe Rural 22 North, has an expectation that emergencies of any type will receive upon time of report of any incident an activation of the closest fire station. Personnel committed to the emergency and non-emergency incidents, including community associate members, will respond and mitigate incidents in a safe and timely fashion as dictated by availability of resources. So you're going to see the term community associate members, and I've got a glossary of what that actually means. We've talked about volunteers. We heard it earlier today on volunteers. I believe in the volunteer programs, but volunteers are something that's we don't see as much, not only here, but throughout the nation. Volunteerism is something that I started out in the fire service, and I'm proud of that, and I moved out throughout my career. And it's not just that I wanted to get into the fire service, I wanted to work with my community. And that's what I see here, is that a lot of folks here within Gerlach and Washoe 22 North also want to work within their communities. But there are standards that have to be met for the different levels that they can provide. And I might as well go through in just a glossary of terms now, because they're going to be mentioned in all three. So the first one is a community associate firefighter. It's a volunteer qualified firefighter. So that's somebody that meets all the qualifications, has gone through, got their firefighter one, meets all the expectations of that. And there's a lot of folks that want to get to that position, not only to help their communities, but maybe they're looking to advance into a career in the fire service. Who knows? But we have to give them that opportunity. The community associate ambulance attendant. So a volunteer ambulance attendant or driver. There's a lot of people throughout the state of Nevada that can be licensed as an ambulance attendant. And they don't have to be an EMT. They don't have to be a paramedic, an EMT basic. They have a CPR card, and they get an ambulance attendant that allows them in our rural communities to act as that driver while the medical personnel are working in the back. Again, associate members. Community Associate Emergency Medical Technician Basic, a volunteer ambulance attendants with the EMT certification. So they get an ambulance attendant's license, and they have that ability to work on their patients at the EMT basic level. The Community Associate Emergency Medical Technician Advanced, a volunteer ambulance attendant with an EMT advanced certification. Community Associate Paramedic, speaks for itself. Volunteer ambulance attendants with a paramedic certification. And then the Community Associate Support Services, volunteer members who provide support services to incidents in our community. And again, there's a large population base out there that can't be a firefighter, they can't be an EMT because of who knows potential health problems that they may have that don't provide them with the ability to be all the way to be certified as a firefighter, but they still can provide support services. And those support services are, an array of items. We look at our CERT program that we have very strong here through the Sheriff's Department and with some of our fire departments throughout the state of Nevada and here in Washoe County. Again, those are volunteers that are used to their level that they feel comfortable providing those services. And they're scattered throughout our areas, especially in our rural communities, and they want to participate, but we need to come up with a description on what their level of participation can be. So going back to page 6, the first recommendation after setting the expectations for the future of any organization, especially within Washoe Rural 22 North, is creation of a potential fire district under 47495. That's what your current fire department is with the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. We've done this in the past. Sierra Fire Protection District was a 474, and prior to that, it was a 473 that was actually managed by the State Division of Forestry through the county commissioners here in Washoe County. You still need a fire board, and I recommend that you maintain that fire board capability as the commission here. Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District retains the management and oversight through an interlocal agreement, contract, whatever you feel is appropriate. Budget. So money's always a question with any type of business that we do anymore, and where do you get it? And in most of all of Washoe Rural 22 North, you don't see an additional fire tax on any of their tax bills out there, like you would find in Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, North Lake Tahoe Fire Protection District, or 2 fire protection districts here in Washoe County. So establish an ad valorem that would reflect all properties associated with Washoe Rural 22 North. That could be set by you as the county commissioners on what that would be once you look at the services that need to be provided. Establish an ambulance transport fees that are concurrent and acceptable and customary rates here in northern Nevada. Your current ambulance system out there does not bill for their services. And when you look at the calls that we're leaving on the tables, most vehicle accidents, people have insurance. Those insurance companies pay for those transports to the hospital. So we've got to look at that very closely to see if there's a way that we could potentially start establishing some revenues from the ambulance transports. And with that, I'd recommend that all residents be provided with an ambulance subscription service, because it's always been a question about folks out there. Should we be billing those folks that are living out there? Well, through a subscription service, we automatically would not send them a bill, but we would bill their insurance. And when you look at it, a large cross-section of what we're seeing, folks are on the Medicaid system. And Medicaid reimbursements are available for these folks, but we just bill insurance only, and then they would never see an ambulance through a subscription, or wouldn't see a bill through a subscription service. Allow for the ambulance reimbursement provided by the Government Emergency Medical Transport GEMT Cost Reimbursement Program. So in 2017, we were able to get legislation passed that allowed taxing authorities, transport services, to get 100% reimbursement for their Medicaid transports. So I can just tell you, working with the North Lake Tahoe Fire Protection District on this, as well as Tahoe, Douglas, and other fire departments throughout the state of Nevada, they were able to start receiving their transports at the 100% rate. What normally happened before that is they'd use what was customary in the Medicare system, and it could be $145 for a transport all the way from Incline Village to Renown. Now you're able to get your base rate as well as your mileages. So they're seeing an increase in those Medicaid reimbursements again, which would help support the system out there when you look at the financial side of things with their ambulance transports. And then establish the minimum requirements for our community associate firefighters, ambulance transport technicians, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, and support services. Because this can't work without those volunteers, but community associate members, because depending on how you staff this, you still need the backup of those agencies to help respond for people power, but also to provide those services when other incidents are taking place. Establish a monetary and incentive program for your community associate members. And this is something I truly believe we should look at a cross-section for all of our volunteers. Because if you look at the Gerlach situation, and I'm sure the same thing goes in Red Rock, after discussing a lot of issues with them, a lot of them that are maintaining their EMTs, that are going after Firefighter 1, are doing it on their own. They're driving from Gerlach to Nixon to other areas to get the training that's required, to get their continuing medical education that they need for their certifications, and they're doing that on their own. So have an avenue to where we can actually give them some type of a stipend, and there's a lot of ways we can do that. We can discuss that later on when it comes to call incentives, training incentives, and things like that. But you got to have a budget to make that happen, so you can work with that. And then throw in fire prevention. And again, fire prevention is something that needs to be done in any area of our jurisdictions. And it's not just the wildland side of things, but it has to do with not only our commercials, but that public education standpoint at all. So that should be also in recommendation number 1. I also listed the different statutes under NRS that would apply for forming a fire district as well as an ambulance transport district. Your service out there, your ambulance service currently is permitted through the state of Nevada through the basic life support level to provide these transport services. You're just not billing for those. And so often what takes place is that your ambulance will pick the patient up and rendezvous with the tribal side of things or the private ambulance providers, and they continue on with that transport to the appropriate facility. So, number 2, again, you see service delivery standards and expectations. And recommendation number 2 is, again, that you look at forming some type of a fire district or a GID, General Improvement District. We also have the 318 GIDs throughout the state of Nevada that, again, have the ability to answer to a board, and the recommendation would be for either one that you maintain the fire board responsibilities when it comes to any type of formation of either a GID or to a fire district. You establish a leadership and management structure for the oversight and direction. And this would be who would be managing things out there, because even though you may have what's considered a volunteer service, you still need to have somebody out there to ensure that things are being done in a uniform manner that's appropriate and meets the expectations when you lay them out as the county commissioners. Institute the minimum requirements again for the associate firefighter, ambulance driver, EMTs all the way down. Endorse that all residents be provided again with the ambulance subscription service and don't receive a bill, but you do bill their insurance services. And then create a request for proposal or a contract that would encompass the service delivery standards that you set as the county commissioners. Again, enter into discussions potentially about contract services that would allow the service delivery standards, associatabilities for ambulance transport fees through the state governmental emergency transport program, cost reimbursement program. And again, establish a monetary incentive program with your community associate members. But then in italics here, you'll see, I said, enter into discussions with your neighboring tribal emergency services to establish possibly an interlocal agreement for services for Gerlach, Washoe, 22 North. They're your closest response factor. They're your neighbors. In the beginning, I went over the response for Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, 1.5 to 2 hours, depending on where their locations are out to the Gerlach area. Coming from California, same thing. You're looking at, close to an hour for any assistance, either from CAL FIRE or the programs that come out of Cedarville. Your next closest is your tribe. And with what they have located out there, they're being utilized quite a bit. I did talk to them. They are interested in discussing this potentially in the future. And it wouldn't be somewhere the tribe could potentially have to be it from now until eternity. I think as things continue to grow out there with any of these recommendations, you're going to see potentially that this could transition over to the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District footprint in the future when you see the population base as well as the ad valorem base that could potentially come. It happened with the Sierra Forest Fire Protection District, which was managed for several years to the state, then transitioned to Sierra Fire District and now to the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. And that just didn't happen overnight. It happened over several years as Washoe County continued to grow into these wildland urban areas, as we refer to them. And then the transition took place once that Truckee Meadows could support that, and again through the ad valorem that was being received. And again, I listed all the NRSs that come out that have to do with the formation of a fire district as well as a 318 General Improvement District. And then recommendation number 3, mirrors similar to what's taking place today with some improvements. And again, the service delivery expectations would have to be set by the board. You maintain your current level of service, current staffing matrix with your career staff or your full-time staff that's out there, your associate emergency support staff, which are your volunteer members. Provide for Truckee Meadows to continue to management and have the responsibility when it comes to making sure the ILA is current. that they have the automatic aid in place. The wildfire protection program is being taken care of through the state, and then having prevention agreements as well. And then budgetary responsibility, again, would go back as it currently is on Washoe County. And then establish the requirement for the community associate firefighters again, so that you know what each levels of service they can provide, so you can bring more folks in to assist when it comes to the services being provided. And then again, endorse that all residents would be supplied with the subscription service and allow for the ambulance reimbursement through the government GEMT program. Again, all three of them have the ambulance capabilities in there, because I truly believe when you look at the capabilities and what we're leaving on the table when it comes to being able to have some type of financial budget put in place, that could be a game changer for what's taking place out there. Would it happen overnight? No. With any of the suggestions, I still would suggest that you're going to look at 2 years before you're going to start seeing the real successes out of what the program could come forward. I can remember several years ago when we moved into the paramedic services in Incline Village. You know, we knew we were going to operate that program as a loss for many years until we started breaking even on that. And the same thing would go when you have a startup organization such as this. But in closing, you have everything it takes out there to have a successful emergency services program of any type. You've got the fire suppression equipment, you have the EMS equipment. Currently, you're working with 2 young men that are working out there as your career staff, and they're doing a phenomenal job from what I could see. They're keeping things moving out there when it comes to working with your volunteers and the current folks that want to become a part of this community associate program. Chief Moore and his staff have been doing everything they can within the ILA to make sure the successes are there. But things have to improve in the future for this to be a success to the communities, not only in Gerlach, but Washoe Road 22 North. You see, I talk a lot about Gerlach, and I haven't said a lot about the Red Rock side of things, and where the line draws, it drives straight over to Red Rock. It'd be very difficult to put this as a footprint and manage it with Gerlach being the response for Red Rock, because geographically, you just can't do it. So there would still have to be cooperation and agreements to bring the same community associate members to the volunteer staff within the Red Rock area as well, to still utilize the same footprint and concept in Gerlach that you could use over in the Red Rock area as well, to get the people that want to serve at the different levels, to get the training they need, and to make sure the equipment's there to provide those services. And that just takes formulating those different disciplines, putting it on paper, and getting people to realize what level of expectation you want them to perform at. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Okay. Chief, you're on my list first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chief Brown, thank you very much for the comprehensive report. My discussions with Chief Brown, I think there's 3 things that rose to the surface. One, Gerlach would like to be its own autonomous fire department, and I think that's important to develop the sense of community in and around the people that live there, because they will take pride in it and they'll work hard because it's where they live. So TM has no interest of making Gerlach a ancillary piece of our department, but we do want to make them successful. 2, on the fire district, it would lend itself to more successful grant applications if it were a legal entity, because then you have standing with the federal government. Even if the tax rate were very, very minimal, you would at least have the ability to apply for grants and probably be more successful. I think I'm accurate in saying that the grants that we have applied for has had to use the county's budget as the basis. And the county's budget is millions and millions of dollars. And when grant reviewers look at that, they're saying, are you kidding me? So if Gerlach is its own entity with a modest budget, we will be more successful in grants. And finally, we just simply need more people. And as Gerlach grows in the future, we can certainly add those people to the roles of the fire district, both not only in emergency response, but just in support services. And I see a successful operation in the next couple of years.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Herman, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You put a lot of information out there, and I know you're in a hurry, so I won't take a lot of your time, but the main thing that, I mean, I agree that Gerlach definitely wants to be its own entity. And if we, since they have a GID already, can fire be under that GID and have the benefits that we're talking about? And so I was looking at the taxable value north, and I see that we tax everybody for roads, and all I get is calls for complaints that their road's not good, and I know we've got a budget problem, but I don't want this to happen if we start taxing everybody in this whole great big area, you know, and they're not getting any services, and it reminds me that in where we live, we don't get a whole lot of services, and we pay the highest taxes in this whole county. So that's why when I ran for office, I didn't promise the people that I'd raise taxes, but I know we got to figure out a way to finance this fire station up there. And so I don't think taxing that whole area is going to do the job. I don't think the people are going to stand for it. Let's see. So I think I covered quite a bit there, and I think we have a long ways to go on this. Okay, we'll work on it. When you get done with the legislature, we'll pick it up. I'm done, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Burke-Bigler, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when you talk about Gerlach being an independent fire department, are you talking about, Chief, an independent fire department within a greater fire district, assuming the ultimate decision, and I have no real idea what the ultimate decision would be here, but assuming the ultimate decision was to form a separate fire district for north of 22, are you talking about having 2 fire districts, Gerlach being independent, and then everybody else in the second fire district? How would that work?
As it relates to Gerlach, the answer is yes, a separate fire district for the Gerlach community in the area that it serves. So not one fire district north of Township 22, just so that the taxes collected would serve those who pay it. And so that fire district in and around Gerlach would not need to be expansive by any means. Red Rock, certainly TM has the ability to serve Red Rock, although the distances, of course, are long, but I think that Red Rock needs the same kind of support. And the issues in Red Rock are very, very similar in that its funding, its people, and its autonomy for their department. So I see 2 small fire districts.
So then you would see 2 small fire districts. Would it be beneficial, or is it possible to look at a fire district for Gerlach and then, in the area that it serves, and then merge Red Rock into TM? Is that fiscally possible?
It's certainly legally possible. It may be fiscally possible. Yes, the answer is yes. Anything's possible.
Well, no, not anything's possible. But of course, I think, you know, a certain number of those people are receiving services that they aren't paying for right now. And so I have a bit of a concern about that, because people on one side of the street are in fact paying for the services, people on the opposite side of the street are not. And I think that's a problem that needs to be corrected. There are many problems out there, I agree with that, and there are many ways to address it. But I think in the greater scheme of things, we really have to decide how we're going to address it from the perspective of the county can no longer afford to spend $1 million plus every year or more than that. I don't really know what the number's at right now to provide services to people who aren't paying taxes for their own services. I'm sorry, it's just the way it works in government. We just don't have that kind of money. And I know that sounds bad, but at the same time, we have really great guys, and there's a whole bunch of them sitting right out in our audience. We have really great guys, and they deserve
to be receiving a fair wage, but if there's no money coming in, they can't be receiving a fair wage. And so, I do have a concern about that. So I personally think, in my personal opinion, and you did an excellent job. Thank you, Chief Brown, for all of this. It's really great information, and I'm really glad that we've had the opportunity to have you on this project for us. And thank you very much. And I personally think we need to take some of Chief's advice and spend some more time working on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Forgive me. VC Lucy. Burke-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Brown, I have a quick question for you. Did you run a fiscal analysis for what would the cost would be for ongoing utilization of either whether you brought that in and created a fire district or kept it as a GID? You know, obviously we have in your staff report the discussion of the modular unit that would require some maintenance. We have a significant amount of assets out there, from the brush trucks to the engine to the water tender, that would require ongoing maintenance. What would those costs be? Do you have those numbers?
And through the chair to Vice Chair Lucy, no, I don't. You know, we have discussed that because there's other costs that, could be considered hidden costs beyond what you mentioned as well.
Right.
And I think that for depending on how you look at what services want to be provided, those all need to be taken into consideration to come up with a number.
Yeah. So, Chief, what I would ask is, if as we continue on with this conversation, is what our fixed asset cost would be for ongoing maintenance, plus what the cost would be for, obviously employees, whether it was firefighters or volunteer, or as Chief Brown points out, community associate members, what it would be costly to, what the cost would be to train those individuals, what that would be. So if we can get some sort of a fiscal analysis, so we know as it pertains to any ad valorem tax or what we would do to fund any type of organization, what that would look and how that would be offset, and at what grants, because to your point, finding grants is an opportunity, but not necessarily a guaranteed. And so that would be something that I want to look at.
Thank you. At first blush, I believe a lot of the services that TM can provide, we do and continue to provide and run those through the countywide cost allocation process. So there's much that TM staff can do to support testing fire hose, testing pumps, testing ladders, making sure that their equipment is up to speed. So there's not a lot of cost other than staff time to go do that. But with respect to contracted services, yes, there would be some. So we can certainly put that together for you.
That'd be great. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Lucy. And so I'll finish this up. I'm very interested in having the discussion with the Pyramid Lake volunteers and Chief Pilt, and they've done a great job in Wadsworth. The protection is very efficient. I'd like to see, Chief, what that might look like and how we might extend that to the extent that they are used to training volunteers. They are used to going through that whole entire process. They do have an ambulance service currently, so they're structured in a way that is very conducive to a service in the Gerlach area. I would also offer that, and when we come back, Mr. Brown, and look at those statistics, I'm not convinced that the statistics are driven by Burning Man only because they offer their own services. They have EMTs, they have ambulance service, they contract with REMSA. So anything that's happening on their site, at least, now maybe it's travel to and fro, but on their site, they're covering that.
And if I could, Chairman.
Please.
I agree with it. And I didn't mean to allude that the increase was because of what was taking place at Burning Man on the playa itself.
Understood.
Because you're totally correct. I've worked with several of the services that are out there. They work with an array of ambulance providers to provide those transport services during their event. But you do see an increase, I'm sure, and I've been out there, not to the Burning Man event, but on the highways, and you see that the roads are going to be, they're congested. There's a lot going on.
Sure.
And so, I think once we look at a breakdown, and I'm more than happy to work with Chief Moore and his staff on that to see what's taking place during those months, as Commissioner Jung mentioned. But And I can't agree more when you say working with potentially our tribal partners. One thing I failed to mention is that, the tribe is currently doing ambulance transport, and they charge for those services at a minimal rate, but they also use the GEMT program through the state of Nevada to receive those funds as well. Sure. And where I'm going with all that, that's a budget source. That's a source of funding the programs out there that we're not currently utilizing. And I truly believe it would be something that would be beneficial for not only now, but in the future for the Gerlach area.
And something else that I think might be helpful would be to have some discussions with one of our healthcare partners to see if there's any appetite to put in an urgent care in the Gerlach area. I mean, that could potentially stave off some of these issues, and there may be some people who would like to, serve in a very rural area. Commissioner Jung, I have you next.
Thank you, Chief Brown, and thank you for the great report, as always. Has this been presented to the GID out in Gerlach?
Not to the GID itself, through the Commissioner Jung. I did talk to members who represent the GID when I met out there with them.
Well, whoever runs the GID, can we get this on their agenda and have them weigh in and vote and hear actually what the people that this will be affecting has to say before we make any decisions? And then I do have a question about not only the calendar and the accidents, but also the population flux throughout the calendar year. Can I get that information as well? I know Burning Man has that information, and I would like to know, because I know it's about 2 weeks before the actual event, and then 2 weeks after, there's a lot of people, probably, not as much as the actual event, but there are a lot of people driving to and fro, which probably accounts, speculatory, because we don't have any data in front of us, may account for that issue. And then I think it's really important that you start looking at options that don't include raising taxes, because the commissioner that represents that district has said very publicly that she promised her constituents that she would not raise taxes. So that's a non-starter for me. If the commissioner of the district is not going to support that, it's difficult for us to go to overthrow that. So I think you should look at the options of not raising taxes and what that might look like. And another question I have about one of your proposals was to, and I believe you met with Commissioner Burke-Bigler, was to create another GID. And I believe Commissioner Burke-Bigler spent a lot of time last legislative session to collapse GIDs. So I'm concerned about starting more GIDs in our whole region and letting that create more government, not less, and where that would fit in all of our plans, because I don't want to go backwards with this issue. I'd rather go forward and not do stuff that has been demonstrated, at least for some people, not me, I don't have any, besides Sun Valley GID, and they do a great job. They're not in danger of being collapsed, but I would like that to be discussed. And I do have an overview question, because you are, really in northern Nevada and probably the entire western region, the expert on fire services, and we're lucky to, don't do that. And we're lucky to have your services here. Can you explain for the general public hazards, liabilities, and incidents when untrained volunteers interact with our professional staff? And I am not saying one's better than the other, because most of you started out as volunteers or you worked for REMSA. So I know the career trajectory. It might be different now because so many people are retiring with the silver tsunami and there's more room for people to come right in. But can you explain, and even if you can't give us an example, I have one, of when that's become not only a hazard for a person's physical life, whether it's the volunteer or the professional firefighter, and most importantly for me, a financial liability.
And through the chair, thank you for the question. That's something that's discussed not only here, but throughout the nation. When you look at the level of training that staff go through, and I don't care if they're volunteers or career staff, there's a minimum level that's acceptable. Along with that goes a minimum level of physical fitness because of the extreme conditions that personnel, both male, female, anybody in the service are put into. And so inherently, most organizations have those minimum requirements, and they put those across the organization and across that Training is a big part of that. Firefighter 1 training, Firefighter 2 training, ensuring that everybody has that same level so that everybody's on the same page of what's taking place, because fire incidents, any type of emergency incident, the same one doesn't happen every single day. Always new occurrences take place. So everybody has to have that same knowledge of how the incident's going to work. They need to have the same training, the same equipment, and that same knowledge on who they're reporting to all the way through the entire process. And so often, we have folks that want to be part of the emergency incident response programs, but they can't meet the minimum requirements. And it's not that we're saying they can't fill the position somewhere, but to be considered at that emergency incident as an all-risk provider, they've got to meet the same level that we require of all of our staff members. If we do not put those requirements on them, and I say we as not only the board, but as the leadership in the organization, we're putting them in harm's way and our career or potentially volunteer staff in harm's way as well. And inherently, we're inheriting that liability that goes with that. I must say, in Incline Village, I had to work with our volunteer organization very closely. And there came a time when we had to look at the organization because they weren't getting provided with the training. We came up with several solutions to provide them with the same level of training that we had to meet hour-wise, training-wise, with all the staff in the organization, whether they're volunteer or career. They chose not to take on that ability because of the amount of time that was allotted. So we had to make a decision as an organization either to carry on the program in another fashion or to shut it off because of the liability that our commissioners, our community carried if we put somebody in harm's way knowing that they didn't meet those minimum requirements. And if you do that and they do get injured, then you have pretty much bought that person for the rest of their life and that injury that's incorporated with that.
Thank you, and I will put as an aside, we've had several experiences with that, and when Chief Moore became our fire chief, one of the things that we asked him to do as a board many years ago was to professionalize his volunteer crew. And when he asked them to do the basic physical capabilities for entry level, not even a boots on the ground holding a fire hose, we lost almost everybody that thought that they were firefighters. And this happens with every single nonprofit. Everybody wants to do the fun thing that they didn't get to do for whatever reason, like at the Nevada Humane Society, when we do animal adoption fairs, everybody wants to walk the dogs around. Nobody wants to do logistics in the back, and not everybody's a great dog handler, but that's the fun part of the volunteering. So I'm glad to get that on the record and to be strict about that, because I don't want anybody to get hurt out there. And we've also had people that worked as volunteers turn around and sue us from Washoe Valley because they weren't treated correctly and they weren't even paid. So there's a lot of liability for taxpayers here, and I can't do that as a fiduciary agent for this county. So I just wanted to get that on the record. There's a lot of confusion, and that comes up, as you know, cyclically. I've heard this since 2004, every 5 to 7 years, we get into this discussion of what the difference is between the two. Can you give me a bottom line price, not today, for each of the scenarios? And, ballpark it in as much as you can. Yep. And the final thing I would say, because Burning Man also comes to us cyclically, I might say, and asks for new roads, because our roads are they're rural roads. They're not the greatest roads out there. They ask for, for us to come out there and do tours for Hearts and Minds, and I get it. I support that. Support Burning Man. Don't have any issue with it. But I'm wondering if we ever thought about creating a toll road out there during special events. People maybe pay $5 a vehicle, and this could go to a fund that would pay for ambulances in Washoe County. Pershing has their own service that is provided to the actual event. That would pay for roads. That could pay for a fire district year-round. So I would look, if you could look at the feasibility, the legality, the workability. I mean, what do you do with locals? There's a lot of moving parts in all of that. But I would argue the locals also get if they get better roads, they get better roads, and they get the bounty of that. So let's look at a toll road during special events, because I know that also with Burning Man buying up much of Gerlach, or their Burning Man supporters, burners that want to live the rest of their life in that very spiritual place, according to them, you're going to have a whole different population you're dealing with out there that might not mind doing a public-private partnership to maintain their lifestyle out there that wouldn't include further density, et cetera. I mean, obviously people live far out in different areas because that's the lifestyle they choose. So those are sort of spitballing some ideas to help address this. But I do believe too, if people don't want to pay the tax for it, I can't look at my Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District taxpayers with a straight face and say it's fair. And I might remind everybody, for the record, when Sierra Fire turned into Truckee Meadows, we raised people's taxes. And a gentleman sitting out there right now who generally hasn't been supportive of raising taxes, they came here and begged us to raise them more. It was the best meeting I ever been at as a Democrat, because we had it at 16 cents and they said, I want 19. And I looked at the chair and said, that was his district. We got to give the people what they want. Because they understood that having a full service fire protection / medical service provider actually means more to them than it does to me and my young husband, because those are mostly retirees that Sierra Fire was representing then. So I think that we can make this work, and have to be a little more creative. I would not rely on the tribe. They have their own issues, especially with Burning Man. So I would like to be, we always should have automatic aid. I believe that's a best practice internationally. But I think we should, if this is what the people want, let's stand it up for them. If it's not what they want, start with the GID, and we put it back to bed. Thank you.
Okay. And just one thing, Mr. Watsfield, perhaps you can eventually chime in on this. Something sticks in my mind, that toll roads are not allowable by NRS in Nevada. You don't have to chime in at this point when we come back and look at all the possible funding sources. So, okay. Commissioner Herman.
In getting into ways of helping to finance, if it goes to the GID that's existing and becomes part of it, I'm not sure how much GERLAC's percentage of PILT money would be, but that would be something it could be earmarked for to help their fire station. So just quick thought.
Okay. All right. I have no one else signed in. Does anyone else wish to make any comments before I open up public comment? Seeing none. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate it. I will open public comment. I have first Ms. Catherine Snedeker.
For the record, Catherine Snedeker, non-person, non-resident, unenfranchised natural woman. We had fully trained, as the paid guys, volunteers. They quit because they weren't allowed to get out of the truck. They were trained exactly the same as the paid guys. We had REMSA people that could man the ambulance service, and we're denied. We're denied volunteers. I seem to live in the black hole of the county. You talk about Gerlich, you talk about Spanish Springs, and here we are, Warm Springs, in the development known as Palomino Valley, and we are treated like crap by all of you. I don't understand. I don't understand, and none of you have explained it. The average response time to Axe Handle Road on Pyramid Highway is about 20 minutes. Once you turn off the highway, the time keeps accumulating, you know. When you get further down the road to Winnemucca Ranch Road and Ironwood Road and Warm Springs, you're looking at 30 minutes to get to the turnoff. But the standard time always declared by the fire department, we were there in 30 minutes. I know fire trucks that went back up to Quaking Aspen took 45 minutes, but everybody's, 30 minutes is how long it took us to get there. So if our qualified volunteers are not allowed to respond to a call before the 45-minute trip from Spanish Springs, you are intentionally endangering us by design. And you still charge us for fire service that we don't receive. They come to put out embers where our local fire department could do some good. So don't give me this, we're so worried about the safety, because it doesn't appear to me that you are. And charging people more is not going to help them get there any faster. Volunteers are a very good way to offset the costs. And we've never had anybody go through the county. And Washoe Valley is a much more dense area than Palomino.
Thank you. I have no one else signed in wishing to speak. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close it and bring it back to the board. Chief, this is listed for possible action. What would you like from us today?
Simply to receive the report from Chief Brown, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Jung, equally seconded by Commissioner Lucy and Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 6 is the IAFF Local 2487 report. I understand Mr. Mark Thayer is here to present.
Welcome, Mr. Byers.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chief, County staff. My name is Mark Thayer. I'm the treasurer for IFF Local 2487. Ian Satterfield is at work today. He's unavailable to do the speech, so I'm here to change it up a little bit. I'll be quick. I have two things to talk about. The first is PTS and the fire service and the peer support program. Over the last several years, the International Association of Firefighters, along with several universities, have identified PTS as being one of the major forces in the fire service that leads to reduced job performance and, in worst cases, suicides of employees. We face risks on a regular basis to our mental health, whether it's from going on multiple casualty incidents, seeing violence, seeing injury to children, and just the normal stresses of our day-to-day activity. In 2015, Florida State University did a study that said nearly 50% of career firefighters at some point think of suicide. A person suffering from PTS is 6 times more likely to attempt suicide. And we do know that PTS affects members of the fire service. In the past, we've typically treated PTS as a hidden, forgotten about problem. And what we've discovered is that early recognition and early treatment can take somebody who is potentially heading down that road to a very violent end and make them very effective firefighters once again. So the Local 2047, with support from the International and support from the district, recently hosted 2 courses on peer support. The peer support courses, since they're relatively new, were attended by people, firefighters from all over the United States. We have people from Washington, Detroit, California. In addition, we had all over Nevada, and then regionally as well, we had support from other fire departments all over. It was really well received. You may have seen some news coverage. We blanketed all the news stations in one day. It was pretty neat. At any rate, I just wanted to raise this, bring this to your attention that we are addressing this at the local level. What a peer support program does is it doesn't replace counselors. It provides for early recognition and then a pathway to get people treatment, so that if we have any of our members face a crisis of this nature, we can get them back and working at 100% relatively quickly. So all I ask from the commissioners is if you see any statewide legislation that supports PTS as a possible condition for workers' comp, similar to what the law enforcement has in the fire service, that you would support it through your colleagues. That's all I have to say about that. On the second note, I just wanted to raise awareness to an event that's happening at the end of April. On April 29th, the Local 2047 will be hosting the Guns and Hoses Golf Tournament in conjunction with the Washoe County Sheriffs. This will be the 7th year that we've done this. To this point, we've raised nearly $130,000 for the Northern Nevada Children's Cancer Foundation. We still have whole sponsors available, and we still have seats available for people who want to golf. The flyer's been passed to Sandy. I don't know if she got it to you yet, but if you're interested, please consider supporting us in this event. It's fantastic. It goes to the Northern Nevada Children's Cancer Foundation, and we're proud to have supported it for several years. That's all I have. If you have any questions, feel free.
Commissioners, I have no one signed in wishing to speak. Do we have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chief, item number 7, life-saving metals presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The life-saving medal presentation to 4 TMFPD personnel who responded to an incident at Washoe Lake on June 23, 2018, involving a small capsized boat with 5 occupants. Captain Trevino, Engineer Mergolo, Firefighter Meredith, and Firefighter Solar, would you join me down here at the podium? And then Chief Beaver and Chief Corrigan, would you also join me, as well as battalion chiefs and division chiefs who may be in the audience? There are many, many incidents, and this is a kind of a culture shift for us. We are going to recognize our personnel going forward who have actually bona fide saved lives, and it happens more often than you think. And on June 23rd, 2018, at about 10 p.m., Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Station 32 Fire and Rescue Crew responded to Washoe Lake after receiving a call from a reporting party who was out walking his dog late at night and heard pleas for help coming from the lake. Captain Mike Trevino, Engineer Vincent Mergolo, Firefighter Paramedic Roger Solar, and Firefighter Paramedic Brandon Meredith arrived on the scene with the objective of locating a vessel with any victims. Now keep in mind, it's pitch black out there. There's absolutely no light. The crew immediately deployed Marine 32, which is our new rescue boat, and one of the things that is remarkable is Captain Trevino made the decision to say, let's take the boat on the initial response. That was a decision right then and there that likely saved 5 people's lives. Using lights and radio directions and shore-based responders along with thermal imaging cameras, Marine 32 located 5 victims who were clinging to an overturned vessel. Ultimately, the crew was successful at retrieving and transporting 5 individuals safely back to shore in 2 trips, not including a final and third trip that included overturning the vessel and towing it back to the shore. Final rescue occurred at 11 p.m. The victims estimated that they had been in the water for almost 3 hours, and from what I hear of the victims is they did not have much more time in being able to cling to that boat. Wow. So the response was timely, the actions were swift and decisive, and 5 lives were saved. The rescue, as I mentioned, the rescue operation presented some challenges in complete darkness, no moon, and the crew had just completed a water rescue class the month before and had trained for the water rescue of multiple victims, but had not really practiced at night. So it is my distinct pleasure to offer and present our life-saving award to our firefighters for their swift action. I realize this is our jobs. But it's something that the board and the community needs to know, that we actually oftentimes save lives. So it's my distinct pleasure, Captain Trevino. Congratulations. Engineer Vinnie Mergolo. Firefighter Paramedic Brandon Meredith. And Firefighter Paramedic Roger Solar.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I cannot begin to express my debt, our debt to you. And I know that the folks that you saved will always be indebted to you, as well as their families. And I know that some would call it routine, but it's not routine. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think this calls for a photograph, board.
Good. Works for me. We'll go inside the well.
No, not at all.
One of those two on mine.
Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to mention Washoe County Sheriff and REMSA were our sister agencies that also helped in that rescue. So my bad for not mentioning that at the podium. But REMSA, thank you very much, and also Sheriff's Department, thanks.
Thank you, Chief. I have no commissioners signed in. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Anyone wishing to make any comments? Okay. Again, thank you so much. Chief, item number 8.
Item 8 is the Fire Chief's Report and informational briefing on operational manners and activities for the month of January and February 2019 to include the following items as listed in the agenda. A brief update on Hidden Valley. We have decided to go through, I think in consultation with county planning, to go through an SUP process on the entire project before we start to renovate the house. We have our consultants hired and ready to go, so work's going to commence on the planning process within the next few days. And we're hoping to begin rehabilitation on the home. I wouldn't say rehab, but just touching up the finishes sometime around August, with construction of the new truck bay sometime next year. Item B is a fire prevention update. Chief Beaver.
Welcome, Chief Beaver.
Good morning, Commissioners. So the first item this is Lisa Beaver, Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. The first item I want to discuss is the community outreach update. So we have begun from the last meeting, if you remember, I told you we were beginning our outreach to the different HOAs in our community. So just to give you an update on that, we met with Cross Creek HOA last Tuesday. It was a good meeting, even though it wasn't very well attended. We had about 6 of the community outside of their board members, so maybe a total of about 10 or 12 people that actually came to the meeting. We were able to address some of the defensible space items, fire adaptive community stuff, driving, about reducing fuels, working with them, brought up some grant information. Was very well received, brought them some also additional handouts. They were going to have another meeting a little later on so that they can hand those out to the rest of their community. We left it open to come back to their next meeting, that they were projecting that they would have more people in attendance. So that's going to be coming up here in the future. This coming Thursday, we actually, from 12 to 1, we're going to be at the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. I'm going to be their guest speaker on Thursday, which I'm going to be reviewing. We've sent them the draft copies of our fire code adoption paperwork. We've also sent them a draft copy of what would be proposed fees in the future to kind of get community feedback from them. On the 20th, also this coming Wednesday on the 20th, tomorrow, we're also meeting with the Verdi Mogul Fire Adaptive Community, their chapter meeting. Next Wednesday, the 27th, we're meeting with Coughlin Ranch HOA. Excuse me? I used to call it Coughlin. It's spelled Coughlin, but it's Colin. It's Colin? Oh, okay, well, thank you. Yeah. Colin Ranch HOA, which we're going to be talking to them again also about defensible space, fuels management, what we can do to help them. And then after that, on Thursday, March 28th, we're going to be meeting with the Hidden Valley HOA group. We have reached out to also Sun Valley GID in order to strategize about doing some community outreach in Sun Valley. So we're hoping that that's going to be coming up within the next month also. We also had, for this year, since January, we've had 3 community outreaches at schools. And we also had this last week, we actually had the Girl Scout tour at Station 33, which was, it was very fun. We had a really good time with our firefighters, and also we had a prevention staff there in order to get the Girl Scouts. We realized that when Girl Scouts are in the house, they are the boss. Okay? That's it.
Did you guys have to buy cookies?
No. But I've done my share, believe me. So.
As have we. Well done.
Okay, and then also on some fire prevention statistics. One of the things that I really want to bring forth is since March 1st, we have issued 894 burn permits.
Wow.
Since this weekend, which is not included in this number, we have a stack about an 1.5 inches thick that we're going to be issuing.
I think you issued all of those in my neighborhood.
Could be. So the one thing I wanted to bring forth just for your information, you know, we've been working very closely with air quality in regards to permits and the hydro basin and stuff. And one of the things, by meeting with them, we also met with North Lake Tahoe, we met with Sparks, so we brought in the other agencies. And one of the things that I learned from the other agencies is that on burn permits, they're actually conducting 100% inspection on their permits. So just to give you an idea, with 894 burn permits, doing 100% inspections on those, and especially if our district, that would be almost a full-time or a full-time and a half person to be able to do that. Because keep in mind, it's also about education. I'd like to do a little bit more education outreach in regards to burning. And I think we might be able to do a better job. So, in regards to ash cans, I want to bring up ash cans. Since January 1st of this year, Chair Hartong, we've actually been 14 ash cans have been issued in your district. Commissioner Herman, we've had 18 in your district. Commissioner Jung, we've got 3, as you can see on your list. And also Commissioner Lucy, Vice Chair Lucy, we've had 8 issued in your area. What I'd like to do is start incorporating some of this in our HOA meetings too, to start seeing that number go up a little bit, okay? I did also want to address, Commissioner Jung, you had a question specific to those numbers that were issued to Reno and also to Sparks. You had requested what kind of a cost that was. And so it can actually cost about $15 with the emblem that gets applied to it's about $2 more. So total cost of a can is about $17. So overall, with the 22 that were issued with the residential community of Reno and also in Sparks, we're talking about $374. But I wanted to bring that to you since you requested. Okay. That's all I have, unless you have some questions for me.
We do. Vice Chair Lucy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Beaver, I have a quick question. In regards to the community outreach update, that's fantastic. It seems like we're getting out to people and having greater conversations. But there has been some discussions from some of the schools in my district that are interested in bringing some Truckee Meadows discussions there and having the kids meet with the firefighters about fire prevention and things to do with fire alarms and stuff like that. Would you be the point of contact that they would, I would give them your information to set those up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's what I want to get that squared away, so for any of those tours that they go right through you. One other thing I would ask in regards to the AFCAM program, as you're pointing out the discussions of bringing those to the HOAs, if we could have you get in contact with county staff, either Assistant County Manager Dave Solero or our management analyst in the county, but get them on also on the CAB meetings. Have you participate? I do think that is important, that it is discussions about homes and home protection and different things like that, which is very relevant to the developments and different things of that nature. So I think it is a relevant topic to have on the CAB meetings. So I think it'd be a good spot for you to go and meet with those.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, any opportunities to be in front of the public, I think is important. So,
Yeah, that would be all my my comments and statements. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lucy. I have no one else wishing to speak. Is there anyone else? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief, 8C.
8C is an operational update from Chief Corrigan.
Chief Corrigan, welcome.
Good morning. Just have a couple items just to give you guys some information. The new water tenders that we've have in will probably go in service at the end of this month. And our folks just got back from Wisconsin on our 2 Type 1 engines, and we should be receiving those by the middle of April, probably go in service by the end of April, just by the time we get them and go through and put a few items in them. So just to give you a little information, in your packet you saw our January run stats and February, nothing out of the ordinary there. Any questions?
I have no one signed in. Is there anyone wishing to speak?
Great, thank
Commissioner
you.
Herman. No, I'm sorry, Chief. Commissioner Herman.
I'm sorry, I can't let you go yet. I just want to know where you think those might be placed.
So the water tenders are looking at going out to Station 32, which is out on East Lake Boulevard. And then the other water tender is going to go to our Mogul station up in Bird Eye. And then those water tenders will be moved into the community and other locations.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief, item 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see time's running short. Defer to the chair whether you'd like me to table this or just keep it going. I think I can blast through it.
What's the desire? Okay. Okay, let's table it, Chief.
Okay?
Okay.
I can also table item 11. I do have some updates, but I don't think that they're terribly important.
Okay.
So I would recommend that we just simply go on to item 13. I do not need a closed session on item 12.
You do not need a closed session?
We do?
You do.
I'm sorry, we do.
Yes, yeah, because I have it listed that we need both TM and Washoe County, so we will, Mr. Watts, if y'all just go into recess and then convene upstairs.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay?
You do need to do it by motion, though.
Okay. Commissioner Lucy.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we convene in closed session for discussions of labor issues with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District.
Okay. Have a motion and I have a second. Commissioner Jung, I see that you're signed in.
Not for that.
Okay. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So now, Chief, item 13, Commissioners, Fire Chief's announcements, and then we'll go to public comment. Do you have any such items, sir?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Jung.
Chief, we still need to meet to go over your budget, and I would like to put a request in that you tell me what you're going to do with the fuels management position that has not been filled, and I also want a history of how the money has been used. Additionally, I need to know if our health insurance, which we pay more for TM than we do for any other insurance, we can't even put them together to get the volume. Does that also include post-traumatic stress disorder treatment, and to what extent? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I have no one else. Anyone else wishing to make any comments? Okay. In the interest of time, I will move on. Chief, item number 14, public comment.
Item 14, public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items, with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Snedeker, I have you signed in first. Welcome.
For the record, I'm Catherine Snedeker, non-person, non-resident, unenfranchised natural woman. I'm giving you formal notice that I will be burning year-round in a pit. The pit is approximately 10 to 15 feet wide. It's 5 feet deep. There are hydrants on 2 sides of it for water. And I have 0 vegetation growing around the pit. So I'm giving you notice that I'm doing this for my fire protection. If you like, I can put it in writing for you. And my address for the record is 4400 Pasture View Road, Cross Street, Chirac. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dene. Welcome.
Welcome to you guys too. Sam, DNA, Dene, the guard angel for government against the Reno media wacko freaks, among other things. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I spent many years flying fighters and bombers, and I'll be very brief because we have another meeting to go to in just a few minutes. I claim to be responsible for 92% of the good things about Reno, and I ask anybody, any of you, to challenge that. Nobody's challenging it, therefore, what would King Solomon say? What would King Solomon say? He would say, Sam, keep the baby. Nice smiley face over there. Somebody got it. At any rate, people say, well, what are you responsible for, Sam? What are these good things you're responsible for? And somebody will challenge whether or not these things are really good. I say Burning Man. When the county commission wanted to shut it down in 2003, I went to the podium and said, don't shut it down. They obeyed me. Some people in the media just hated Burning Man. Disgusting people, get rid of them. No, smoking marijuana, which is legal now. All of the things the media hated about it, and suddenly they glorify it like it was God reinvented. That's the media for you, how they can flip-flop. I saved the Air National Guard. The Air National Guard would not be here in Reno, likely would not be here in Reno. That saved 300 jobs. Back in the late 90s when the Air Guard was getting a new airplane, the Air Guard here in Reno and the airport and the bureaucrats wanted them to get the fighter plane, the F-16 or the A-10 or something. And I said, no, those are not functional for a city of Reno. I said, get the C-130 cargo plane. It can do some good things. And guess what? They got the cargo plane. What would King Solomon say? What would he say? Keep the baby, Sam. I could go on and on. The Gaga factory. Ask Mike Kazimierski. Mike Kazimierski, the head of EDON, who I have made one of the most famous people in Reno because of the great things I've done to, not really planning to do it, to make him a powerful man in his community. He begged me when he first arrived here to try to talk Tesla into bringing their Gaga factory here to Reno. And I went as the only person at the podium. I said, bring the Gaga factory to Reno, and they did. That has turned out to not be the best thing. Maybe the worst thing that ever happened to Reno, if you think of all the gridlock, the road rage, the hatred, the homeless people all over the place. I could go on, and I told you I'd be short, so there's the other 3, 4. Anyway, thank you for allowing, no, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Dene. I have no one else signed in. Is there anyone else wishing to speak before I close? Okay, we are in recess, and we will convene upstairs. Thank you. About just a 5-minute break, and we'll be right back.